All right, so hopefully this is the right one. You're seeing the camera, hearing. Let me double check. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay. So what I'm hoping to do today is I'm hoping actually to maybe go through the whole entire thing in one class. If I can go through everything in one class, I think it'll be a good overview because the class format's going to change. We are no longer going to be attacking buyers with Brian Collins. We're going to go through Keller Williams. It's Keller Williams Win with Buyers. So it's going to be a little bit more official and all that good stuff. Let me double check here. I want to make sure that I am.
So this training is new here?
Hmm? The school?
Yeah.
Yeah, the school is new. It just started it this month. It just started January 6th. So, yeah. All right, so here's this. We're good to go. I have to pay attention a little bit to my phone for a second because I'm waiting for my sellers to give me a response so I can let people know. So we're going to start out with generating buyer leads. This is something that is very important to every agent. This is the lifeblood that you have when you're a real estate agent. If you have no leads, you have no business. Period. End of story. So this is a quote from the 2017 National Association of Surveys. 70% of buyers only interviewed one agent. 17% interviewed two. So it's a big gap. If you're the first agent, you most likely are going to win the business. And so how do you get to be on the interview list? Referrals are far and away the most dominant factor. 42% of buyers choose to work with an agent who was referred to them by a friend, a neighbor, a relative, or an agent who was a friend, neighbor, relative. 12% of buyers choose to work with someone with whom they have previously bought or sold a home. So right there, you're looking at, what was that, 42 and 12, so that's 54% of all buyers are working with your sphere. So that's why you always have to let every single person know every single time that you're a real estate agent. Because if you don't, you start now. If you don't have your real estate license, you start now. You tell them, in 2 months I'm going to have my real estate license. Because in 2 months they will forget, guaranteed. So the rest of the sources are widely varied. 6% of buyers made contact with their agent as a result of the agent's name being on a for sale sign or an open house sign. And then, so here a new agent wants to remember that friends, neighbors, relatives, that category. 42% of them, again, find their referrals from them. You may know a lot of people that aren't about to sell, but they may know somebody who is about to sell. So you want to make a list of your contacts. You want to do it in command. You want to contact them constantly, keep them on an email drip with their permission, contact them on the phone, just call them, just say, hey, how's it going? Just catch up. You don't have to do anything special for lead generating with your sphere. Just call up your friend. Just say, hey, how's it going? How's your kids? Yeah, what you doing tomorrow? Cool, awesome. Just want to let you know that I'm getting my real estate license. Maybe you saw me post about it on Facebook. So if you know anybody who's looking to buy or sell a house, absolutely just keep me in mind. And they go, oh yeah, I just talked to a friend at church the other day who said they were going to sell their house, but they're not ready yet. Great, I don't get my license for 2 months. We'll talk then. And then just keep in contact. Give me their information. Let me meet them. Set up a meeting. It's a warm lead. Those are the best leads. Warm leads are amazing. So, and it's just not this is not just for the first month, but throughout your entire career, because they will always forget. Your family members, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your nephews, when they're old enough, they will forget that you are a real estate agent. You have to always remind people. 6% of buyers found the agent they use as a result of an open house. Another 9% found their agent through a website. And only 2% found the agent that they worked with as a result of walking in or calling in the office. How I really need to change this because floor time for me is very productive. I feel like it generated about 4 or 5 transactions last year. It's not going to, keep my family fed or anything like that. We're not eating filet mignon for sure, but it's enough to, keep the referrals coming in. Once you build those relationships with those people, that's 12 people or 5 people or whatever that, now I can rely on to review me on websites that generate leads. They can, tell their family and friends that generates leads. They can eventually want to sell their house that's just going to generate leads. So I like floor time. I think it's a good one. So 52% of buyers said that what they wanted most was help finding the right home to purchase. So they want someone who is knowledgeable in the market. 92% said knowledge of the real estate market was a very important quality for an agent to have. So they want to have buyer's agents that know the market, like Bobby and Mike were just talking about today. Know your market, know your numbers, know your stats, know the inventory, know the average price point for each area. There's some, pretty diverse areas that we've got here. Spring Valley Lake is a pretty, not diverse, I meant like enclosed, what is the word? Like specific areas, like Spring Valley Lake is an area that you can just know those numbers very easily. Like Desert Knolls, that area in Apple Valley, it's easy to know that, that area. Yeah, exactly. All the desirable areas. Know your Oak Hill numbers, east and west. Know Baldy Mesa numbers. Those are all, which is now almost another Oak Hills. I think they're calling it Oak Hills North or something stupid now. Yeah, I've it's like everybody wants that. Everybody wants that name and attached to their house. But eventually, the whole entire high desert is just going to be Oak Hills, and it's going to drop the value of that name. Yeah, Oak Hills North. Yeah, exactly. Start spreading that around. An agent who can impress a buyer with their knowledge of the market, not just your company's listings, but everything in the market, is the one that stands a good chance of establishing a relationship with that buyer who walks into an open house or makes a call to the office. So again, know your numbers. It's very important. So your sphere. These are your family, these are your friends, these are any groups that you're involved with, the scouts, church, knitting club, PTA meetings. Everywhere you are is a group of people that you can market to, that you can let them know, hey, I'm in real estate. If you're standing in line at the grocery store, you have the opportunity to maybe connect different things to real estate. People are talking about, oh, my baby, my grandbaby's coming to live with me. Oh, great. If you need a bigger house, here's my card. That was weird. Yeah. So these are, everywhere you are is somewhere that you can be. You always have to ask for referrals. You want to ask for referrals and make sure that people know that you're in real estate. If you don't ask for the business is not just going to fall in your lap. Every once in a while, sure, you'll get business that just comes to you. But you have to ask for the referrals. You have to be on top of it and be aggressive about it. You don't want to be too aggressive because then people find that off-putting. But hey, since we talked about real estate a little bit, do you know anybody who's looking to buy or sell a house? That's all you need to say. And if they do, they know somebody, then they're going to tell you. They're going to be like, oh yeah, I just talked to somebody. Or they're going to be like, not right now. Great. Can I email you later on and, just follow up with you later? Sure, absolutely. Great. And then that's your open invitation to, send them an email. Again, remind them what you do. It's 100% effective to remind everybody what you do on a constant basis. Scripts on KW Connect can overcome objections. There are so many places, there's so many things on KW Connect. When we go through the Win with Buyers class, that includes a lot of scripts. We have a lot of overcoming objections and things that you can use every day to help lead generate. If you need help with those, you can come see me or give me an email, and I will get them to you. Dornoch Farms. So this is just an example of how you can door knock your farm. If that's the one thing you really like to do, some people really like to be outside. I prefer it over phone calls.
No, I don't like that.
You don't like door knocking? Okay. So and not everybody does, but if you wanted to, just concentrate on door knocking, this is a way that you can do. You can pick 10, 50 home farms. So you have all of these different areas that you go, and then you just hit one every single day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks. And then that means you're hitting like, what? I don't remember how much that is. Yeah. So it's 500 homes every 2 weeks. So if you pay, 50 times 10. Good Lord. So 50 times 10. So it's 500 homes every 2 weeks that you're touching. And if you just start over and you kind of get to know your neighborhoods, you'll know those farms and what the average price point is. So when you go to talk to neighbors, hey, how's it going? I was here a couple weeks ago. Just wanted to remind you I'm in real estate. Here's a sheet that has your average valuation for your farm, that sort of thing. You can up those to 50 home farms, because when you're new, like 50 homes is a lot of homes. Probably take you a couple hours. I feel like once you've experienced and you've done this a few times, it's very easy to walk through 50 homes. You kind of get to know people's schedules a little bit, like who's going to be home, I've door knocked this one 15 times and nobody's ever answered once. So most likely they're probably either night people, or they're gone, or they just really don't want to talk to me. Yeah. So it's not for everybody, but some of it's phone calls. Most people hate phone calls, and they'd rather just door knock because there's a chance that nobody's going to answer, and they can just leave a business card. Because that's the thing. I feel like you can leave a message on a message machine, but most people aren't. Mm-hmm. Yep, they probably do the first few times. They absolutely are going to do that. I do the same thing. But if you consistently go, you show consistency, eventually in 3, 4, 5 months, they go, someone's talking about selling their house. I'm like, there's this guy who comes by my house every single 2 weeks on a dot. I'm going to give him a call. I feel like I've got his number memorized because I've thrown away 50 of his cards. But that's just the way it is. So it's a way that it's consistency. Everything in real estate is consistency. You can't send out one mailer to a neighborhood because they're going to look at it and they're going to throw it away. You have to send out one mailer every single week for 3 months. And then you're going to start seeing the numbers. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So consistency creates that memory for them when they go, there's this guy who's always bugging me, is always knocking on my door. I'm going to give him a call because he seems to know what's going on because he's here every single 2 weeks. So that's the way to do that. Learn your scripts for success. You want to learn scripts, and you want to customize them to you. You don't want to sound like a robot. Hello, Mr. Seller. I just wanted to let you know that I am walking the area because your home is now worth $250,000 in this market. You know what I mean? You want to make it yourself. You want to make it personal so that you can, so you can use those. So being a buyer's agent, what does that mean? First of all, you got to start off with qualifying your buyer. You've lead generated, you door knocked, you've made phone calls, you did all of the stuff. You made YouTube videos, you put Facebook ads out. Whatever it is that you used to generate a buyer lead, now you have a buyer. So now you're going to qualify the buyer. You're going to ask them questions, and you're going to find out if they're working with another agent, because you don't want to waste your time if they're already working with an agent and they're already being shown homes. You don't want to do that. You want to say, tell me about your search so far. Because most people are using the internet resources that are out there. They're using Trulia, they're using Zillow, they're using Redfin. They're all using all of these consumer-facing products. So they probably already have a list of houses that, that they want to see. What's important in a home to you? You want to find out what they need. Do they need 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms? Do they have a mother-in-law that they are going to put out in the garage out back or something, You got to figure out what kind of house that they're looking for. Big yard, small yard, accessible house, any of those things.
But what about when they want something but they can afford it?
Yeah, that's,
How do you tell them?
I mean, that's easy. It's like, here's your price point. Here's the pre-qualification letter that you've got from your lender. Then here are the homes that fit in that box. I feel like right now in some areas, most areas right now are 100 to 101% of list price. So they're going over. But in some areas, there's still 98 to 99%. So you can say, oh, well, we can look 1 or 2% over your maximum so that we can try and bring the price down. But right now, I mean, the market is there's so many buyers and there's so many sellers. It's such a balanced market that there's not really a whole lot of wiggle room either way. Most sellers still want more and buyers still want less, but nobody's really getting there, and so it's just a really balanced market out there. Like I said, like even what they said earlier today, in some areas it's a buyer's market, and at some price points it's a seller's market. So you got to know that, and if the buyer's like, hey, I can only afford $250,000, then they're going to have a much harder time finding a home than if they were approved for $400,000. And that's just the reality. As an agent, you have to let them know that, I'm sorry, this is not what you're qualified for. We can shop around lenders and see if there's someone else out there that may qualify you for more money, but usually, that's going to be pretty consistent across the board as far as the amount of money that they can get. So ask them if there's any other properties they found. Like I said, they'll probably look at Zillow or whatever, and they might even have a list for you. They're like, I want to see this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Ask them if they're paying cash or if they're going to have financing. This is where we get into the pre-qualification, because if they're not paying cash, then obviously they are going to need to be pre-qualified there. Ask them if they have questions about the buying process. One of the biggest generations out there right now, the millennials, they're in their early 20s and 30s now, so they're asking, how do we buy a house? This is going to be my first time home buying. They've never been through the process before. Baby boomers, there's 70 million of them. They already own, a lot of them already have houses. They've been through the process. They don't really need that education. They just really need to know what their house is worth and how quickly can you sell it. They want to know what your marketing plan is if you're going to list their house. But as far as buyers go, when you're dealing with the millennials, they're online. They're looking at houses online. They're looking at the Open Doors and Zillow offers, and they're trying to buy their houses, on their phones. It's crazy. It's true, and they can do it too. So 35% of buyers are first-time home buyers, like I was saying. What you can do if California, we don't require it at our brokerage, and in California it's not a requirement either. In some states it is a requirement for you to have a buyer representation agreement. But if you have a buyer's representation agreement, if you need one, I typically only use them if I don't feel like the buyer is very committed. If I feel like they're being wishy-washy, if they've talked about, I've looked at other houses before, they may have already used another agent, that sort of thing, I may say, hey, why don't you sign a buyer representation agreement? This just protects me and allows me to work for you full time so that you can get the best quality, best service possible.
Yeah, because if someone
Yeah.
talk to me, maybe
I gotta move over even further. So, oh yeah, buyer's representation agreement. Inside the buyer's representation agreement is the AD, which is the agency disclosure, and also the buyer representation agreement, and also the buyer's inspection advisory. So in one form, the buyer's representation agreement does consist of 3 separate CAR forms. So you'll need to know that and be prepared to sign all that. You need to be able to go over the agency disclosure, which is a very, very important part of the transaction. It is the agreement that you're making with your client to be a representative of them. So the agency disclosure goes over very specific duties that you have to your buyer and that your buyer also has to you. Buyers need to work toward buying a home. That's part of the deal. Like they're not there to waste your time. You're not there to waste their time. So one of the buyer responsibilities is to make sure that everybody's working toward actually purchasing a home. The fiduciary duty you owe to your buyer as a buyer's agent is typically the utmost duty, utmost care and honesty, integrity in all dealings, being faithful, that sort of thing. There's very specific wording that is in there, and we're not going to go over every single document here. So this is, again, just going to be an overview of all the documents that you would use for that. And then as far as qualifying the buyer goes, when you get your lending, you want to get the pre-approval. You want to know what their proof of funds are if they are paying cash. You still need proof of funds even with a buyer's lender, if they're financing. Cash to close is not the same thing as a down payment. Some people get those confused. The down payment can be, anywhere from 3 to 20% of the purchase price. But that number does not include the actual closing cost amount. A lot of people get those, they get them confused and they think, maybe a VA buyer that has no down payment, they go, I don't need money to buy a house. And it's like, well, you still have to pay for most of your closing cost fees. And there are ways that we can ask for credits, that sort of thing, to help cover those. So finding the right home, when you get you've qualified your buyer, they have a pre-approval, let's just say 350, and you know what they need. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to jump in the MLS and you're going to start looking at all of the homes that are available in their price range that have the amenities that they need, so you can see exactly what their options are. Like I said, if they're less than 250 or 250, it's going to be very, very slim. There's going to be some houses in Barstow probably. That's probably going to be it. Maybe Lucerne Valley. They're going to go further out. More than 250 in the 300s and the 400s, then you're open to pretty much everything right now, which is great. You can share your personalized Keller Williams app. We'll go through here in just a second here on actually how to do that. And then you show homes in person. You meet them. You don't, as a buyer's agent, you don't drive people around anymore. It's not the thing that we do anymore. That's for your safety, and you want to make sure that you're being safe at all times. So you are going to meet them at a house. You're going to let people know that you're going to a house. If you are so inclined, you can get your concealed carry permit, and you can have a weapon on you. We have Damsel in Defense that comes in every once in a while and showcases their products, which is pepper sprays and tasers and that sort of thing. You should always have some sort of protection on you at all times. All right, so to share your personalized app, you have that's what it looks like on your phone right there. You open it up. The very middle button right there, it says share. So you're going to click on that. And then you get a pop-up and it's either text, email, Facebook, or Twitter. You can choose how you want to share your app. If you're sharing it with a person, email or text is going to be your best option. And then when you click on that, there's no. Huh? Yeah. Any of your listings, it's connected to a nationwide MLS that allows you to. They'll be able to find any house in the MLS. So any house that's listed out there, that's what they should use to search for homes. It keeps them out of the Zillow, like, this house is available. Well, it's not available. It went pending 3 weeks ago. Zillow just doesn't. They only pay to update their data once in a while, and so it keeps them out of the out-of-date information. I feel like there's a lot of land that I have listed currently that Zillow still shows active with another agent.
In the app,
it's crazy.
Cost?
Huh?
It's free or?
Yep. Nope. We get that for free. You get that when you join, when you're all signed up and everything, and you get your stuff. I feel like you get an app right away. So that's how you share it. So zip forms. This is a real quick. If you've done a transaction before, this will be a little review. If you have never done a transaction before in California, then this is how you would create a transaction in your zip forms. These are available. I can email them to you later on when you're a little bit more here, since we don't have a lot of people here that even have access to it. Well, 50% of you have access and 50% of you don't have access, so it's not going to make that big of a difference, but you'll log into car.org. You'll put in, at car.org, you'll get this, and it'll say access zip forms. You just click on that. You'll put in your login information, and it'll take you. Yes, this is what you pay for your yearly dues. Yes. No, not MLS. That's your quarterly. That's quarterly. Your yearly. I don't know what the current number is right now. Well, starting up is different than renewing, so it's been a while since I've started up, so I don't really know what that number is right now. So you get this little pop-up, and you just click on Continue to Zip Forms. Once you're in here, this is where all of your transactions will live, and you can see down at the bottom, I've got a few transactions that are going there. This is from a few months ago. You can click on the New button, and then you can put in a new purchase or offer. You'll type in the address there. That's usually how you name your transactions. It's typically the easiest. I do the address and the last name of the seller or the last name of the client, so that way, just in case there's similar addresses out there, they can get kind of confusing. So I always have to make sure I have the last name in there. You fill out, again, the address will pre-populate for you, and then you can check off residential, whether it's active. And if you have a template, you can apply those. We are going to, in February, have a templates class for sure. You can also connect your transaction directly to the MLS. You can put in the MLS number, and it'll pull all the information from the house, the listing agent, everything will be pulled right into your transaction, so that is super nice to have that available. And then you click Save. And then you can move over to the Documents tab. And the Documents tab, you can click on the blue button that says Add. Yep, it says Add Forms. And you can search by each individual form name. Once you've searched for a name, I put an ETA. It's an extension of time addendum. And then they show up. You can click on it. It'll add it to the transaction. You get a little box that says that it is added. And there you go. You're in there. So now preparing your offer for buyers. The first thing you want to do is you want to do a CMA. You want to do a valuation for your buyers. Listing agents typically will just go with whatever their seller wants. There's a lot of listings out there that are overpriced. I mean, I'm sure that comes as a huge shock to everybody, but listing agents don't always just list it for what they think the market value is. Sellers say, man, I really want to get like $15,000 more than that. So they go, yeah, sure, whatever. We'll market. Yeah, we'll list it. It's fine. So you always want to run a CMA for your buyer so that you know exactly what the prices should be in there. You want to make sure that your buyer knows what the market value is, even if they're okay with the list price. They're like, yeah, I'm fine with that price. It's like, okay, that's great, but when it comes down to it, is this house going to appraise for this listing price? And the listing agent has to prove that that's the price that is current. So the home has to appraise. It's great if the value comes in higher for the buyer. If they end up getting more equity for them, that's great. But if the value comes in low, it adds a lot of complications. You can negotiate with the seller to lower the purchase price, which is typically what you do. Sellers don't like that. They don't want to lower the purchase price. They want more money. They don't want less money. Or the buyer can come up with additional cash out of pocket for the value difference. So if the home appraises for $340,000, but the seller wants $350,000 for it, the bank's going to say, that's great, we'll let you buy this house, but you have to pay us the additional $10,000. We want that in cash up front so that we can say, okay, now the house is worth, with your cash, $350,000. And a lot of buyers don't like to do that because it is, sorry, I'll go back if you were still writing. A lot of buyers don't like to do that because it's hard to come up with that kind of cash, If it's a huge difference, if it's like $1,000, usually you can negotiate between either the buyer coming up with $500 and maybe the seller dropping at $500, you can meet in the middle. Those are options that you'd have. It's, when the appraisal comes in low, it's time to get creative. It's all right. All right. So the offer. The offer is going to start with the cover sheet in zip forms. The cover sheet is going to be where you put all of the pertinent information from your transaction, including the house details, the agent's details, yours and the other agent's details, and then every form that you create in zip forms will pull that data from the cover sheet, and it will make sure that all of the fields are filled out for you properly. It's very important. I really have a hard time accepting offers, or when I'm a listing agent, I have a hard time accepting offers that are not complete. When the agents are lazy and they don't fill out all the information properly, they don't put in the things that they need to. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, incomplete paperwork. And I will just flat out reject it and say, please make sure that this is filled out properly. They won't fill out my information because they didn't either connect it to the MLS, which takes 30 seconds and it fills out all the information for them, or they just, they don't do it. And I won't take an offer that is incomplete. They have to have everything filled out. I'm not there to do their paperwork. That's not what I'm getting paid for. So I make sure that they do that. So the RPA is the big one. It's the residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions. The RPA itself consists of, I think, 5 documents now, or yeah, 6. The agency disclosure, which we kind of talked about a minute ago, that again clarifies the job that you have to do for the client and the kind of client that the client should be to you. The possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, that is the disclosure that needs to be signed. The wire fraud advisory, that is required, and it's all included. It's the RPA, when you load it in your zip forms, all of these forms are in there already. Wire fraud advisory is one that's important, especially for buyers, because the wire fraud that is happening nowadays is really, really geared toward the buyer who wires their money to escrow or wires their money to title. Sellers typically only receive one wire at the end from escrow, and there's not a whole lot of, since escrow is sending the money, there's not a whole lot of wire fraud on the seller side. But on the buyer side, though, that's where almost all of it comes from. It is a huge problem now. So the new form that was just added December of 2019, actually it was like January 1st, 2020, is the California Consumer Privacy Act advisory. This advisory shows up now at the end of the RPA. If you have a template that's created in your zip forms, you have to delete the existing RPA, and you have to go back in and re-add it for the new forms to show up, because it does not automatically update inside your template.
And that form should be there, no matter what, like on the first representation.
Yeah, every document, every RPA that you've written since the first, you should have had this document with it. You can add it separately if it's not in there. Like I personally just added the document to my template instead of deleting and then because I have a lot of stuff that I have pre-filled out. I feel like that was going to cause a lot more headache. The CCPA is a very simple, just sign. There's nothing to fill out. It's just an advisory, and it lets buyers, or it lets both buyers and sellers know that they have certain opt-out privileges for their data being shared, and for like email marketing and that sort of thing. So it is, it's a new required document. Another document that can be included in your offer is the septic well inspection monument cost allocation. So if the house that you're purchasing is on septic, if it has a monument, a legal recognized monument, or if it has a private well, then they'll need to fill out this form to allocate the cost of who's going to pay for what inspections. Section 7 in the RPA is the allocation of other inspections or whatever, and then in that it'll say I think it's section 5 that has the other addendums, SWPI, the septic well. That one is a checkbox that you can check. It'll add it to your transaction, and then you can move forward with both those documents. FVAC is the FHA VA amendatory clause. If the transaction is FHA or VA, you are going to require that document to be signed in there. The lender will also have a secondary FHA VA amendatory clause, or especially a VA amendatory clause that's a little bit bigger, whatever. You'll get that from the lender.
And you still get commission with VA?
Huh?
You get commission with VA?
You get paid for every transaction.
Only?
Yes.
Because some people, they don't
VA is a lending type. That's all it is. It's just the financing. Yeah, that's just the type of financing that is available. For veterans, a VA loan has no down payment. Okay.
But some people, they do that real estate, they don't know. They don't know how to offer to their customers.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, the lenders, if they're a veteran, that's usually the only option for veterans, just because it's a very low cost loan. So, if your buyer has to sell their house, you have to fill out a contingency for buyer's sale of property, a COP. It's required so that you can start that contingency and that you protect your buyer. So in case they can't sell their house, then they're protected for not having to purchase a home that they can't afford. And then last but not least, for your offer, you're going to need your lender pre-approval. It should have a copy of their FICO scores and their proof of funds, which can be copies of bank statements from the lender, or maybe the seller or the buyer will just give you a copy of their bank statement. You can block out all the information, any account numbers, addresses, that sort of thing. And I also block out recent transactions if it's something that they give me, because nobody needs to know what their recent transactions are. Really, they just need to see that they have the funds to close. So that usually typically will be a complete offer. So an offer response, once you've sent in your offer to the seller's agent, to the seller's agent, the seller can respond on a form SCO, which is a seller counteroffer. This document is a place where you can call out each individual item that you are disagreeing on, and you can negotiate the terms for that document, or for the transaction. The very first thing that it says is that the terms, it says that everything in your RPA is agreed upon except for the following, and then you list all of the things that you are negotiating. Your SCO will always be number one. And then if you, as a buyer's agent, if you want to respond, let's say they are asking for $10,000, but you only want to give them $5,000 more, whatever, you respond on a buyer counteroffer. That buyer counteroffer is buyer counteroffer number one, and you go up from there. So if the seller responds again, it'll be SCO number two, and et cetera, et cetera. So, this must be where I stopped last time. So required buyer's disclosures. After you have your offer accepted and you've negotiated all of the terms that you're okay with, the things that you need to do as a buyer's agent, you'll need to prepare an AVID, which is an agent visual inspection. You will go through and visually inspect all aspects of the home. Not all aspects, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. Inside the AVID itself, the first page very clearly describes the areas that what you do not have to do, which includes opening things, looking behind things, moving things. You do not need to climb into or on top of things. So no attic. It's a visual inspection that you do. You walk into a room, you turn around, you visually inspect everything, and then you move on to the next room. You don't need to test fixtures, you don't need to test lights, you don't need to open up cabinets or move furniture or anything like that. There's no attics or basements or crawl spaces. Your buyer's inspection election, this is not required by Keller Williams here, but it is a good idea to always give this out to your buyers. It gives them the option to look over the entire list of all of the different inspections that they could have. Sometimes buyers don't know what they can have. They think, oh, well, I'm going to have a home inspection, but that's pretty much it, right? Well, you can have radon gas tested, you can have mold, you can have the soil stability tested, you can have your lot lines inspected, you could have the government, the county can come out and mark your actual property lines, and you might find out that your neighbor built their fence 3 feet into your property. Those are all different things that you can have done, and a buyer may not know about them. So you give them this sheet of paper and it lists all of the inspections. They can just check off the ones that they want to buy, that they want to do. It is at their expense. The seller typically won't pay for anything other than maybe the pest inspection and the home warranty. That's pretty much it. The buyer is responsible for any other inspections that they want to have done. And it just gives them the option to say yes or no. We used to have the Megan's Law database requirement here, but we do not anymore, so you do not have to fill out a DBD any longer. It's redundant. It's the same information is both on the RPA and the SBSA, so it's something that we don't have to necessarily do here. HID is a FHA home inspection disclosure. The title of it is For Your Protection, Get a Home Inspection. If you have an FHA loan, you have to have an HID signed. You have to have the home inspection disclosure signed if your buyer has an FHA loan. And it just a simple thing, just says why you should have a home inspection, gives the details about what is available to them, and then at the bottom it says we do or we do not want to have a home inspection. They'll check one of those boxes, sign it, and that's all that they need. Market condition advisory is an advisory that it basically says, like, look, the market fluctuates constantly. If you're putting in an offer today for $350,000, your home may be worth $100,000 tomorrow because the market crashes, or the market might explode and you've got a $1 million home on your hands now. It is 100% up to the buyer the amount of money that they want to offer. That is not, we can give our advice, but we do not dictate that to them. They're the boss. That's what I always say to my buyers and my sellers. It's like, here's my advice. You're the boss, though. You let me know what you want to do. So we want to give them that advisory. SBSA is a statewide buyer and seller advisory. This is a 14-page huge document, and it covers everything that could possibly, for both buyers and sellers, inspection types, the required disclosures a seller has to make. If someone died, if there was methamphetamines on the property, if they used some weird chemical, if the home was old and built before '78 and needs a lead disclosure or an asbestos, that sort of thing. So it's a huge document. All of these are the Avid, with the exception of the Avid and maybe the BIE, the buyer's inspection election. All of these are non-contractual disclosures. These are just advisories saying, hey, for your information, they're just signing to say, hey, I've received this information. They're not saying, hey, I have to follow any rules or anything like that.
And these we had in the SIP form?
Yep, every single one of these come from zip forms. Yep. One of the other documents is typically mandatory, especially for buyers, is the supplemental property tax notification, the SPT. The SPT is going to let the buyers know that, when a buyer sells or when a seller sells their home, the assessor comes out and they are going to reassess the tax valuation of the property. If most likely the value has gone up at that point, and so the prepaid taxes that the seller pays in escrow and the prepaid taxes the buyer pays in escrow typically will not cover the new valuation that takes place about a month after the close of escrow. So your buyer will most likely get a supplemental property tax notification. They'll get a supplemental tax bill in the mail. And you'll need to check with your escrow to make sure they have an impound account, whether they have an impound account set up for that notification, that property tax bill that comes in additional, or if the buyer's going to be responsible for paying that when it comes in. So that's something that's on you that you need to communicate with your team about getting done. The water conserving fixtures and CO2 carbon monoxide detector notice, WCMD. This is required. The water conserving fixtures is a notice that says that all homes built after, I think, April 17th of 1994 should have water conserving plumbing fixtures, water saving shower heads, low flow toilets, those sorts of things.
Which year?
1984.
Anything. It should anything after 1994 should have these functions already built in. That was the law that was put into place that they had to have them. But if it's from before 1994, the seller should have in 1994 updated their furniture, updated their fixtures. But it's not a point of sale requirement. It's not something that say like the CO2, like you can sell a home without a low flow water toilet, without a low flow toilet. You cannot, however, sell a home without a carbon monoxide detector. So carbon monoxide detector is typically a point of sale thing that everybody requires. It's usually called out by the appraiser, and the lender requires it. But low flow toilets, not a requirement, but it is an advisory just so that you should know, like, hey, if they don't have it, you should put them in because it's going to save you money on your water bill and also help save water, in California. And then one other one that we no longer require is the water heater and smoke detector statement of compliance. This again is redundant on the RPA and the SBSA, so we don't require this as a document anymore. You can still have your people sign it, but as far as your transaction completeness on the document side, it's not required any longer for our brokerage. For everybody out on YouTube, you need to check with your broker to see if it is still required for you. And the BIW, the buyer inspection waiver. If any inspection is waived, you have to sign a BIW. If they decide that they don't want to have a pest inspection, buyer needs to sign a waiver. If they decide they don't want to have a home inspection, they need to have a waiver. If they decide they don't want to do anything that is the normal standard, you need to sign a waiver to make sure that they understand that the broker is saying these are the things that you should have at a minimum, and you are going against the advice of the broker because you don't want to cover, you want to cover your end because you don't want them to come back and say, well, I didn't know I needed to have a home inspection. Nobody told me. It's like, well, we told you on all 3 of these forms that you signed that you're not going to have a home inspection. So definitely have that waiver ready for you if anybody wants to do that. What that said, I went in and I tried to fix all this stuff, but apparently it didn't work. It says all credits to the buyer must be relayed to your lender, to the lender. You cannot not tell your lender about a credit, whether it's a seller credit at the start of the contract that they worked into the RPA. The seller says, the buyer says, oh, I want $3,000 for closing costs. That's great. The lender has to know about it, and typically the lender will let you know up front before you even start looking at houses. Hey, these guys are going to need, a seller credit of X amount of dollars to qualify. So this is the minimum amount.
You're saying to the lender, you're saying?
Yes, to the lender. So if for some reason later on there's a credit to the seller or the credit to the buyer for, say, repairs, you have to let the lender know that there's another credit coming to the buyer. Some lenders have a credit cap that they are only allow so much money to be given to the buyer from a certain party, usually the seller. So if they're capped at like $5,000 and you ask for $4,000 on the RPA and you get a $4,000 seller credit to help with buyer closing costs, and then you go in and negotiate $2,000 credit for repairs, well, that's $6,000 now. The lender could be like, no, we only can accept $5,000. You gotta figure this out. So it's very important to let everybody know. Also, escrow. You have to let escrow know. Typically, that's the seller. It should be the seller's agent's job because they're the ones that usually have the relationship with the escrow, where the buyer has more of the relationship with the lender. Everybody has to know because escrow has to balance their books, and they have to know about all these credits so that they can, have accurate accounting. And then when the lender sends all of their documents over to escrow and says, okay, here's all the seller credits and the buyers and all this stuff, and they go, oh, well, these don't match up. We were told that there was an extra credit. If the buyer's lender doesn't know about it, that can cause a lot of problems. Also, with the TRID, the 3-day signing thing or whatever, if they have to redo their documents because there is a missing credit to the buyer, that delays your escrow. That could delay your closing. So it's very important and
Who knows about the credit? The lender?
everybody has to know about it.
But he has to tell you, or you have to know already?
Yeah, your lender will let you know if the buyer absolutely has to have a seller credit to start the process. So that information should come from your lender. They should go, yep, they're qualified, they're good on this purchase, up to this price. They're going to need at least a 2% credit from the seller in order to do this because they don't have as much money as they would like to have. If it takes a couple extra months, we can probably save up some more money so we can ask for less credit down the line. But if they're looking for something and we get something approved in the next couple of days, they're going to need X amount of dollars for a seller credit. So that's something that the lender will do for you. Timelines for buying. This is also super important. Your 3-day earnest money deposit. Day 1 is the first day after acceptance. So you have your contract, your offer, it's accepted, you've negotiated all your terms, everything's good to go. Let's just say it started, January 31st. January 31st, you have your offer accepted, escrow opens, so day 1 is going to be February 1st. That's going to be your typical day 1. Day 3 for the earnest money deposit can't fall on a weekend or on a holiday. So if you open it up on the 1st, your day 1 is the 1st, 2nd, the 3rd. If the 3rd, February 3rd, happens to fall on Sunday and Super Bowl Sunday, then you have until the 4th is your 3rd day. It would be Monday. Your 7-day seller disclosure, it's not a contingency. I wrote 7-day contingency, but it's not. It's a 7-day notice period, disclosure period. Again, all of these start off the day after the first day of acceptance. The seller should deliver to you within this period your TDS, which is the transfer disclosure statement signed by the seller that tells the buyer everything that they should know about the home, anything that needed to be disclosed. The SPQ is a very similar document. It asks about the same kind of things, governmental easements or noise ordinances or noisy neighbors, all of the things that the sellers need to disclose. Death on the property within the last 3 years, that sort of thing. In that 7-day period, you definitely want to order your home warranty if you're the buyer's agent, which we are representing. We're doing this right now. So you're going to want to order your home warranty. If you have a TC, maybe your TC will order your home warranty for you. But you definitely want to order it soon, so that way they get all of their information in a timely manner after close of escrow. It does take a couple weeks for them to get all of their information. The 17-day inspection contingency. This is the heavy one. I feel like the big one, because this is the 17 days that starts. Day 1 is the first day after acceptance. This is where you're going to have your pest inspection done, which typically the seller pays for. In our market here, the seller pays for the pest inspection. If there's a septic inspection required, the SWPI that we included with our offer, you're going to need to get that scheduled, so that's in here. The seller will typically pay for a septic inspection because nobody wants to pay for the seller's crap. You know what I mean? Buyers definitely don't want to do that.
Do we have to get a lot of septic time?
I feel like at least 50% of the homes up here are going to be on septic. Yeah, there's a lot. It's a real 50-50 whether it is or it isn't. Like if it's in a big tract home in Victorville, you're not going to worry about it. But most likely, if they're on a half an acre, and even in Victorville, I feel like just on the other side of 7th, I feel like most of those are on septic tanks. It's not sewer, even though right on the other side of 7th, it's all sewer. So, the home inspection. You want to get your home inspection scheduled as soon as possible so that the buyer has time to look through. It's a very long report. It's usually 60 to 70 pages, depending on the company that you use. They're long and they're detailed, so you want to make sure that you have enough time for your seller to go in. Your appraisal report, you want to make sure that the buyer has paid for the appraisal. The lender will order the appraisal, so you always want to get that done as soon as possible after acceptance, is get the appraisal ordered. Sometimes it can take a couple of days to a week or two to get an appraiser out there. If you're going to have a mold test or inspection done, which I highly recommend you don't because they're very expensive and frankly I feel like they're worthless, that needs to be negotiated before someone goes out there, whether who's going to pay for it. Yeah.
And he has to choose his pest inspection?
The seller will choose who they use for their pest inspection. Yeah, the seller's agent. During the 17-day inspection contingency, your request for repairs has to be done. That's why you need to make sure all your inspections are done as early as possible, because you really want to get them done within that 17-day inspection period. The repairs don't need to be done, if there are any repairs that are required, they don't have to be done inside the 17-day inspection period, but they do have to be negotiated and finalized before the end of that period. Typically, that's what you want. And then the seller can respond to a buyer's request for repairs on the seller's response to buyer request for repairs. It's an RRRR. It's the hardest document to call because there's nothing easy about it. The name's long and the abbreviation's long. So That's where the seller will say, hey, we're going to do all of the things except, whatever. It gives the seller the opportunity to say, or we'll just give you a credit instead of fixing all of these things, or we'll reduce the purchase price for all those things. The buyer has the opportunity to ask for either a reduction or a credit on the request for repairs, and then the seller's response is says that they are either going to do it or they're not going to do it.
If you say no repairs, you just sell it as it is, or how do you?
You can do that, yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's harder to get a sale that way for sure. If the seller's not willing to do anything and you put in the MLS, hey, no seller repairs, there's nothing, nobody's going to fix anything. I mean, you're going to sit a lot longer because you're going to have to find that buyer who's willing to buy the house as it is with no repairs. And a lot of people, they'll say, oh yeah, that's fine. And they'll come in, they'll get their home inspection and they'll find, the 60 pages of everything that needs to be done and go, whew, this is going to be 50 grand. This isn't going to be like, this isn't cosmetic paint and, paint and makeup or whatever. This is like foundational problems and, active termite infestations or, whatever. And they're like, no, we're out. So at the end of this 17-day inspection period, you will remove your contingencies. If you're happy, you've negotiated all the contract, you've negotiated all the repairs, what they're going to do, you have the ability to remove the contingency to say, okay, we're good with this seller contingency, or with the 17-day contingency. We're okay, we can remove that now. Then you have a 21-day loan contingency. It starts the day after acceptance. This is the time for the lender to collect all of the documents from the buyer. Typically, a pre-qualification is a verbal discussion between the buyer and the lender. The buyer says, yeah, I make this much money, my credit score is right in this range, and I've been at my job for this long, and this is what I'm looking for. The buyer, the lender will say, hey, based on what you just told me, yeah, I think we're good with a pre-qualification of this amount of dollars. A pre-approval is all of that plus the documentation that is sent into the lender, pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements. Those are sent to the lender. The lender verifies these things and say, okay, I can see now that you make this much money. I pulled your credit. We've looked at your credit scores. Everything is good to go. Now we'll give you a full-on pre-approval, and you will get, your pre-approval or whatever. So typically after that, the lender still requires more documentation. They may need W-2 statements from past tax returns. They may need additional pay stubs, or if you're pulling money from your 401k, you'll need your 401k statement. So this time, after the pre-approval, this is the time that the lender goes through and verifies all the documents. They order the appraisal, and the underwriter is involved to finalize the approval. Once underwriting, who is a third party who looks out for the bank, and they go, okay, we have the appraisal report, so we know how much the house is worth, and here's all the lending officer's information on the buyer. Here's all their supporting documents that says that they're good to go with their purchase. We're going to look at it and see if it makes sense for the bank to do business, between this house and with this house's collateral and this person. So the underwriter is the last step in the loan approval process. They are the ones that issue final loan approval and say, yep, everything lines up, we're good to move ahead. And then you would do another contingency removal. Once you get your final loan approval, you would remove your loan contingency and your appraisal contingency. And this would typically be your contingency removal number 2, because this would happen after your 17 days, but typically before your 21 days. So if your loan approval comes in early, if it's, they're on top of everything and you get loan approval before your 17-day, on the contingency removal, there's a box to check that just says remove all contingencies right now, and then you're free of those. There are questions people ask all the time, like, should I remove the contingencies? I don't have any funny animations with this one, so here's all the information. So the contingencies, they cover your buyer. They protect your buyer with all that stuff. They provide the protection, and contractually, you are obligated to remove contingencies at each specified time frame. 17 days, 21 days, those time frames. If you need to extend those time frames, you can, but you are supposed to remove your contingencies. But if you don't remove your contingencies, the seller can sign a notice to perform. The seller says, hey, we want you to remove your contingencies. You have 48 hours to comply. Otherwise, we can back out of the deal. Because honestly, at this point, the seller has very little recourse to back out of a contract. There's very few things that they can do to just cancel. They really can't, honestly. They have to give a notice to perform, and then that gives them the out that they need to back out of a contract. Again, 48 hours to comply, or the seller can or will back out of the contract. So it's really up to you whether you remove your contingencies. You know, if everything's good, if all your inspections came back good, and you don't really have a lot of repairs that you've negotiated, or they're going to fix a couple outlets or something like that, like there's no reason to upset the seller to the point that they may want to back out of, the deal over a couple of outlets. So it'd be a good idea to remove the contingencies. Sometimes people don't remove their loan contingency because it always falls right around the same time that the closing happens. So you have that option to not remove your loan contingency. Someone may bother you, one of the other agents at the closing. They're like, hey, we never got all of your contingencies removed. Can you please send those over? And then you can. If it's already closed, they can't back out. So you don't really have to do anything at that point. But again, that's up to you, and you should talk to your broker whether or not they advise you to remove your contingencies or to push your luck. Buyer's closing day. Final steps. 3 to 5 days before closing, you're going to do your final walkthrough. A lot of buyers, they like to go through the final walkthrough, and they're like, oh yeah, let's ask for this, and let's ask for this, and let's ask. No. It's too late for all that. Those negotiations close with your 17-day, with your request for repairs, that sort of thing. Your final walkthrough specifically says that is there to make sure that the house is in substantially the same condition as when you first walked through. So, after everything's said and done, a couple days before closing, you walk in, all the cabinets are gone in the kitchen. That's a big deal. That's a big no-no. That's hey, this isn't how the house was when I bought it, when we made the deal to buy it. So you want to do your final walkthrough. There's a big section in there that allows you to write any exceptions. It says, if there's anything that you've noted that is not the same, you can note it here. You can also use the final walkthrough to make sure and double check all of the repairs that you have negotiated to make sure those are done. And then if any of the repairs aren't done, you can note them in the exception field. You can get a residential checklist from Paula here in our office. Check with your TC if you're at another brokerage or something like that, to get the residential checklist is going to show you all of the required documents for the buyer transaction, which we've gone over all of them from the checklist here, but somebody else's brokerage online may be different. But you can just get this checklist so that every time you go through a transaction, you can make sure that you have all of the correct documents. You're going to send your buyer an RFR, which is a receipt for reports. It is a document that you fill out. You check off the box of the type of inspection. You put who prepared the inspection and the date it was done. And you go through the whole entire thing. You put down your appraisal report, your home inspection report, if the pest report, anything that you've sent over to the buyer saying whether it's again, the pest report comes from the seller, so they're going to give it to you, you're going to give it to your buyer so that they know that the pest report is clear. You want to write down every single report that you've gotten for the whole entire transaction on this document and have the buyer sign it. A qualified substitute, you may or may not use this, you may not see it. It came all the way up here. The qualified substitute comes from escrow or possibly from the seller's agent to escrow. Escrow will sign it and then you'll sign it. Basically what it is a document that says escrow has verified the identity of the sellers, and they have, they are typically for the notification of the seller's non-foreign status, the FERPTA, the IRS requirements for taxes. It's tax paper, basically saying that because the paper requires a social security number, address and all this stuff. It's personal information from the seller. If the seller doesn't want to give it to the buyer, escrow will look at all the paperwork. They'll sign off on it and say, we've done all this stuff, and then you'll get a qualified substitute. That's what that means, is that this escrow is the qualified substitute for, that IRS tax paper. On closing day, in the morning, typically between 11 and 2 out here in California, loans will fund from the lender. The wire will come into title. Most people don't know that title actually receives the money from the lender, not escrow. So title will get that. They will, after the loan has been funded, escrow will send over the deed with a courier. It will record special the same day in San Bernardino County. The escrow or the deed will be recorded between 5 and 6 p.m. Same day. In LA County, typically it's always the next day. They don't record escrow, or they don't record special. So unless escrow closes really bright and early in the morning, your deed's typically going to record the next day in LA County. Once the deed has recorded, that is legal closing for your escrow. Financial closing is when the loan funds. Legal closing is when the deed is recorded. At that point, the home is the buyer's house, and they can now receive the keys. As the buyer's agent, even if the loan funds, and doesn't matter if it's a $2 million house, they sent $2 million over, the house isn't theirs until the deed records. They have to wait until the deed's recorded. You cannot give keys to somebody whose deed is not. Escrow and title, they work together because title actually gets the money from the lender, and then title, once they paid off the existing home loan, they will send over the remaining balance of the money to escrow. Escrow will then divvy up and pay any of the contractors that have been billed to escrow, like the pest report typically is paid through escrow. NHD is a seller report that is paid through escrow. Repairs, anything that if there's a contractor that the seller had done, sometimes they'll be billed to escrow. So the escrow will then divvy up all that money, and everything that's left over will then be wired to the buyer, to the seller as their disbursement, as their net profit. So for me personally, this is just how I kind of try and keep my relationship with my buyer going, because it's very exciting. You spend a lot of time with your buyer in the first those 2 months. You're looking for houses. You're spending a lot of weekends together. You're talking over the phone. You're texting each other. Trying to figure out exactly what home to buy, and then you go through the whole stressful process of escrow, and they're nervous that they're going to lose the house, or it's going to be one thing or another. So you spend a lot of time with them, and all of a sudden escrow closes, and then boom, like you're gone. That's it. You're out. And buyers can take it personally, and they can say, well, I feel like they abandoned me at the last minute. You know what I mean? Like, even though you were there, they got their money and they ran. I personally, 2 to 3 weeks after close, I like to prepare a little USB drive. You get them on Amazon for very inexpensive. They're just like 1 gigabyte little thumb drives. I take all of the documents that they've signed, every report, everything, pictures that I've taken, anything to do with the transaction, I put it on that jump drive. And then I take a card and write a thank you card and just tell them how much I appreciate them or whatever. And then I go and I drive it to their house, knock on their door. If I don't know if they're going to be home, I might text them to let them know that I'm on my way and say, hey, I just got something to drop off to you. Give them the jump drive and say, hey, your final closing statement's on here. You can give that to your tax professional when it's time. Here's all of the documents that you signed. So if you've been trying to keep track of all the 150 emails that I sent you over the last 2 months, like, you don't have to. Every document's right here on this thumb drive, and you can have that. And they really appreciate it. You give them a card, and then you say, hey, like, what's going on? Like, let me go over this home warranty that we bought, that the seller bought for you. Here's all the documentation for it. This is what it covers. This is what it doesn't cover. Sometimes they don't understand that home warranty isn't their home insurance. So it's up to you to kind of distinguish between the two. You ask them if they need anything else, if they've moved in, you have all the options to just be the friendly guy or person that you've been through the whole entire process, and don't try to not be helpful after the deal's done. You want them to know that you're still there for them. Again, go over the home warranty in depth. Definitely ask them permission. Say, hey, is it okay if I email you every once in a while just to keep in touch? Like, they're so happy with you right now, they're probably gonna be like, of course, I hope you do. And then that's the permission that you need so that you can put them on a drip campaign in the command and the smart plans. You can have them, once a year or once a month, be emailed to. Put them on a drip campaign, as I just said. again, ask for referrals. Like, hey, do you know anybody else? Yeah, I'm sure you've been talking to all your coworkers and your friends. Anybody else that may have said they might be interested? Here's a couple of my cards. If you want to give me their phone numbers, I can contact them just to see where they're at. Because they're really happy with you right now. Like if they are very happy with you right now, which they should be, But sometimes you gotta really read the room there, and you gotta find out if that's a referral that you want to ask for in there, because maybe things didn't go right, and you're just like, ooh, maybe I don't, maybe they're not happy with me right now. So, you'll have to know those things. And always ask for a written review. Send them a link to your Google page, your Google business page. Send them a link to just Facebook. Just say, hey, go on my Facebook business page. If you could write me a review, I would really love it. Like, people look at these reviews now. It's a huge part of culture to look and read online reviews now. Look at Amazon. Like, you get 7,000 reviews on an item. And what do? You probably scroll through like 5 or 10 of them. Those look pretty good. There's enough people here. The average review is 4.5 stars. Why wouldn't I buy that product? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a huge thing. So always ask for them to do it. I say bribe them. Tell them, hey, if you can review me once, that'd be great. If you can copy and paste your review to 3 other websites, I'll give you a gift card, a $5 Starbucks gift card for each review you give. Because people will just go, I don't really want to do that. I'm just going to do the one. It's fine. But if they're like, well, if I get like $15 of Starbucks out of it, I will do all 3 of them. And that's it. You're closed. So now they're on a drip campaign. You have all of these, you've built the relationship. You've maintained the relationship. So each time you email them, you're asking for referrals. Each time you call them, check up every couple months with them. Just say, hey, how's it going? You can add in campaigns here. You can add their house anniversary, and it'll email them. I got an email 2 days ago from the first the first buyer that I ever had, my first transaction ever. He said, hey man, thanks for the email. It's always really great to remember, when I bought this house with you. That was, 4 years ago or something like that? And I feel like he gets the email, and that's it. And I said, hey, that's great. Do you know anybody who's looking to buy or sell? Like, are you guys ready to look to move? They've talked to me a couple times already about it. So it's like, it's a great opening to say, hey, remember that one time you said you were ready to move and you might want to sell your house? Like, where are you at with that? Oh, yeah, we're ready. We're doing it. So that's pretty much it. So the next class, I think for February, we're going to be changing up, and we're going to be starting to do win with buyers. And yeah, it's the Keller Williams sanction. It's a lot more in depth. It includes scripts, and it's a much bigger deal. So we're going to start. I'm going to look into that, getting that done, and hopefully it'll be good to go. Alrighty, everybody. Thanks so much.